may I introduce... Oh, just me this week. Meredith. I'm flying solo. But we have a very special treat for you. An amazing guest, the award-winning, best-selling children's author, M G Leonard. But not only is she that, she's also my old partner in crime from the 90s. And if we can remember bits of it, we might even share some anecdotes. Hope you enjoy my interview with M G Leonard. Today on For Calling Birds, I'm so excited. I've hardly slept, and then we had tech issues, but we're here and it's so worth it. I am joined by one of my oldest friends, but best-selling, award-winning children's author, M G Leonard, and it sounds so weird introducing you as that. Hello.
Hello. Because you and I both know it's not my real name.
No. If you could explain, Maya is actually, I know Maya as Maya. We were flatmates. Well, we sort of just
many years
squatted.
Ago.
I don't think we
Let's be honest though, Meza, we met during panto season. We were in the same panto. That's how we met.
We were in the same panto group. So we were in the Little Gadsden Players, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I think it was Red Riding Hood. And you were always the handsome prince because of your lovely deep voice and the fact that you were tall and slim.
I look like a boy is what you're trying not to say.
No, you didn't. Yeah. You looked like a bloody supermodel, Maya. You were unbelievable. You still are unbelievable looking. Such a shame you're hidden away in an office. You were Robin Hood. That was it.
I was Robin Hood. I got to slap my thigh and wave a sword around in a promiscuous manner.
And then didn't we fall in love? Wasn't I Felicity that we then ran off with? It was a very weird adaptation.
It was. It was very strange. But yes, that's where we fell in love, Mez.
We did. And then we went out with boys in the same band. We were groupies together.
Oh my goodness,
yeah. Oh, and then you stayed in music and I went into fashion. And so I could sit and chat to you like we've, chatted in the past, but it will be probably quite boring and in-jokey for the listeners. So I have to be quite responsible here, which is going to be a first. Ooh. Considering the parties we've been to. But I want to pretend I don't know you.
Okay.
And say to you, what got you into writing children's books? Because I think there's probably more than just one route to what led you here.
Yeah, and it's quite a good question, actually, because this is quite an admission. When I first wrote Beetle Boy, which, for those of you who haven't read the children's book Beetle Boy,
I've read it.
It's about a boy who befriends a sentient rhinoceros beetle and ends up in a battle to save the planet with lots of intelligent beetles. But anyway, when I started writing it, I thought it was an adult book.
Really?
Yeah, because, oh my goodness, I think... I tried to write a bit in my 20s. I kind of liked the idea of being a writer, and I liked, I worked in theatre and I loved storytelling, and I thought, I'm going to tell stories.
You were always like that. You were my friend that, told poetry and read lots. You were that friend.
Words. Yeah, and I always know a quote and can spout Shakespeare at the drop of a hat. So I've always had ideas about telling stories, but what I did not realise was that my inner voice, my narrative voice in my head, is 12. And because I was a grown-up, I assumed what I was writing was grown-up. And obviously, this is embarrassing to admit, but the reason why my hero for that book was a child was because I really wanted to explore how ignorant we are about insects and beetles in particular. And I didn't think that a grown-up who is set in their ways and has made their mind up about the world would be open-minded enough to get involved with insects. So I knew that my hero had to be a child. And what I didn't know is that in the publishing world, if your hero is a child, you're essentially writing a children's book, unless it deals with horrible things like abuse, which my books do not. And I
horrible things like beetles. Except they're not horrible anymore.
They're not horrible. They're wonderful.
But you used to be scared.
Yeah, I used to, I used to be absolutely terrified of everything that was small and crept and crawled. But so yeah, I was writing the book and I sent it to an agent, and I told them it was a grown-up book, and they wrote back to me saying it absolutely isn't. And I hadn't really realised, but it was a very freeing moment because I realised the things that I think are funny or interesting or cool or peculiar or particular are the things that interest children. And I also realised that my sense of humour is quite childish and facile, and that if I wrote it for children, I was allowed to be me, like honestly
Yeah.
me. I was allowed to write with my real narrative voice, and that's what I do. And yeah, I just didn't know I was a children's author until someone else read my book and
So
told
did
me.
it need a lot of tweaking to make into a children's book, or was it pretty much there already?
No, it was pretty much there already. I mean,
Hardly 50 Shades.
oh my goodness. Like, well, if you've read it, like, spoiler alert, people, at
Yeah.
the end of Beetle Boy, there's a gigantic battle of insects versus the bad guys. And there's an awful lot of poo because beetles, dung beetles, etc., they use poo, which I thought was hilarious. I've always had a scatological sense of humour, which is the grown-up way of saying I laugh at poo and fart jokes. And yeah, I thought, wow, like a big battle. I've never read that in a book before, a giant battle where the baddies get pelted with poop, which I thought was hilarious. So I had written that, and that's when I was told this book is not for grown-ups.
But do you know what? I vaguely remember a conversation that we had, unless it's not a memory, it's something I've created in my head because we don't remember much from the 90s. But I vaguely remember a conversation in the White Hart pub where we all
Wow.
spoke about reincarnation and how awful it would be to come back as certain things. And I vaguely remember, unless I'm hallucinating, someone saying, imagine coming back as a dung beetle and dying by sinking into your own poo. And I remember that from a night out and really, really laughing. I'm wondering, Maya, whether that subliminally was your reason for writing. I'd like to take full credit for that.
I mean, it might have been me who said it and then laughed raucously at the concept of dying in a pit of poo, because obviously that, to me, is very funny.
Drowning in your own shit.
I know, exactly. And that's what one of the bad guys does at the end of Beetle Boy. So maybe you're right. But I think the thing is that I genuinely, on a serious note, I genuinely believe that the books that you read that really resonate with you when you're between the ages of kind of 8 and 9 and 12, those books, like if you cut a person down the middle like a stick of rock, those are the books that you find in the heart of people, because I think when you're that age, you can really, really go into a book and feel everything about it. And writing for children of that age is a real privilege, because if they love your book, they will read it like 20 times. They will learn it inside out. They will spout bits of it back to your face. They will tell you if they think anything is not right, and it's actually, I never did it on purpose, but I think I was always meant to do it. I think this is always what I should have been doing, but it's taken me a long time to get here.
And they're the best critics, the kids. Out of the mouths of babes and drunks is the saying, because children and drunks will always tell you the truth. Now, I want to ask you more about Beetle Boy because I absolutely loved it. I read it with my kids, and I believe that it's being made into something. But with regards to writing about beetles and insects, I mean, you obviously research species, and because each beetle, I'm assuming, has a different strength and characteristic, which is then, because in Beetle Boy, it's very much you're aware of what the beetles can do, and so your research is then you've now become like a proper bug expert, haven't you? And a twitcher.
Yeah, I know. It's wild. So one of the things that I really enjoy about being a writer is the research, is learning. And, well, you and I, Mez, we both know.
Didn't do much learning.
I did not like school. And I seem to remember you didn't have much fun there either. Neither of us were.
I think we hung out, not at school.
But the thing is that I think formal education works for some people, but it certainly didn't work for me. And that's why I escaped into theatre and all sorts of other things like music and artistic pursuits. But I found the education system really well, I always felt outside it. I always felt like I was failing to understand what was required of me. And I've got a slightly rebellious nature. So when someone tells me to do something, yeah, I tend to not want to do what I'm told. So, so I didn't really enjoy learning at school. But as an adult, one of my favourite things to do is to learn, ironically. But I like to do it in my own way at my own time. And I am now a Beatle expert. I spent 6 years studying beetles, and you can actually spend an entire life studying beetles and not know even half of what there is to know about all the species on the planet, because there are over 400,000 of them. But I am a very... Yeah.
Does it have a name, like a paleontologist? Sorry.
Yeah, a coleopterist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you could say that I am an amateur coleopterist, but I tend to know an awful lot more than most scientists, because a scientist will specialise in one specific species of beetle and the habitat of that beetle. But because beetles vary so wildly, like a ladybird and a dung beetle are wildly different, but they're both beetles. So a specialist will only specialise in one of those types of beetle, whereas I know quite a lot about many species of beetle because I wanted to put them all into a work of fiction. And the unique thing about the Beetle Boy books is across the entire series, you meet 60 different species of beetle, and all of them are accurately represented and fully researched. And I have entomologists, that means insect scientists, edit my books for accuracy. So if I fictionalize something or make something up, they will correct it. So even though the story is
as well.
Yes, exactly. So the story is a wild fabrication, but the actual insect facts are true. So if you enjoy the story, the idea is by osmosis, you'll know a lot more about insects and hopefully appreciate them.
I love that. It makes learning fun.
Exactly.
Because you don't realise you're learning. And like you, if as soon as I know I'm being taught something, I shut off. But if I'm subliminally learning. So you say that if you cut someone down the middle like a stick of rock and it tells you exactly, I would say mine would be embarrassingly Enid Blyton and The Faraway Tree. Only children's books, which I think is so magical for you, that people will remember the books they read as a child far more than they read as adults. I can't tell you what I've read in the last 10 years. I really can't. It's terrible.
No, it really
but
stays
children's
with you.
books, Faraway Tree, Judy Blume.
Yes.
I wasn't... I vaguely remember you being into things like Tolkien, weren't you? You were a little bit more...
Yeah. I read everything. So I read through genres, as in I got onto fantasy. I read absolutely every single fantasy book. Then I went on to sci-fi. I was an avid reader.
Yes. Didn't you read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you reading that.
I read everything. But if you cut me through the middle, what you would find is Roald Dahl's The Twits, which I still think is hilarious. I like the idea of two people just loathing each other so much yet still living with each other. I mean, really, it is just a paradigm for modern divorce. Yeah, exactly. It's like putting worms in people's spaghetti. So you'd find The Twits and The Secret Garden, which is by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is a story that I've read maybe 5 or 6 times. And it's got a weird kind of colonial thread that you could definitely set fire to and do away with. That's no longer useful in modern literature, but the basic theme of nature and gardening and wild animals being really good for your mental health and getting outdoors, that book's really special to me and has kind of guided me in my adulthood. So yeah,
I had a tape of Hannah Gordon reading that I used to listen to in the car. It was really, really beautiful. And I think what's so lovely about the books you mentioned, certainly Roald Dahl, whilst we all laugh at the Twits, there are wonderful, beautiful morals and lessons to be learned from each of those books. And I think you've definitely taken that part of being a children's author too, treating kids decency and how good always, I think,
triumphs.
I mean, you very rarely get a kid's book where the baddies win and the world explodes and that's the end of it.
No, but you do nowadays. I have to say there is a slight trend for slightly nihilistic Armageddon-y kind of, the future's so grim, and slightly depressing books. And I feel, I don't know, I like to offer children hope, a good laugh, a little bit of secret education, and hopefully characters that they can relate to and feel like akin to. But I definitely believe in a wholehearted, happy ending, preferably with someone getting pelted with poo.
Yeah, I think if ever there's poo involved, you're onto a winner.
Absolutely.
Now, so Beetle Boy, we should really talk about all the books you've written, because there's loads, and then they've been translated, and then it's all going onto the screen as well, isn't it? So I'm very excited, and I will get this all jumbled up. So could you just remind our listeners of the Beetle Boy series, the books? It starts off with Beetle Boy, which I love. He's your son, isn't he? He's inspired by your eldest on the cover.
So I do completely and utterly use my children as fodder for my books. So my Beetle Boy series is based on my oldest son, Arthur, but he was 4 when I started writing them. And it was how I imagined he would be when he was 12. And of course, he got to 12 and he was absolutely nothing like how I'd imagined he would be. That series is based on him. And that is a trilogy with 3 books called Beetle Boy, Beetle Queen, and Battle of the Beetles. But because I did so much research, I also wrote a non-fiction companion to go with the trilogy, which is all about the Beatles that you meet in the pages. And that's called A Beetle Collector's Handbook. So
that's wonderful. That's why I like the Da Vinci Code, the illustrated one.
Yes, because there's lots
point
of extra.
reference.
Yes. So, and then I moved on to write about trains, adventures on trains, which has been wildly successful, actually. And I don't know, I had the idea for this series because when I took Arthur to bookshops, that's the name of my oldest son, when I took him to bookshops and libraries when he was about 6 or 7, he had really loved all the Thomas the Tank Engine stuff, and he had Brio and Lego trains, and he was engine mad. And when I got him into the kind of the age where children are meant to be reading chapter books, I couldn't find anything that naturally followed on from his passions. I could find magical trains powered by glitter and driven by unicorns, but he really was not interested in that. He wanted real trains set in the real world, and I couldn't find any. And at the time, which was many years ago, I thought, wow, someone could really clean up if they wrote an adventure series set on real trains, because there are a lot of children out there who have been groomed by Thomas the Tank Engine and all of those toys, and there isn't anything to fill that gap. So I had the idea, but I genuinely thought that it wasn't something I could write, because I have absolutely no interest in engines, mechanics, how any of that stuff works. My brain does not work that way, and so I kind of parked the idea until my colleague at the National Theatre, where I was working when I wrote Beetle Boy, asked me what I was going to write next. And I suddenly realised, oh, he loves trains, and he's a playwright, and he's got lots of information about railways that he just knows because he's read books about railways. And I thought, oh, maybe we could write them together, and then my lack of knowledge wouldn't matter. Because I researched thoroughly for my books, I didn't want to write a series that was, that was playing hard and fast with the truth. So I wanted to do the research, but didn't have the time to do it myself or the inclination. Whereas Sam Sedgman, who's my co-author on that series, absolutely loves railways. So
he wasn't an author to begin with. You knew
no,
each
he'd
other
never
from
written.
the National.
Yeah, he was. I was his boss.
No idea. No.
Yeah.
I
I'm
thought your
15 years older than
publishers
him.
had put you all together and said, right, you two off to write another book.
Oh no.
Oh, I love this even more.
Yeah.
This is
He
brilliant.
was on my
so
team.
Sam Sedgman was on your team at the National Theatre when you were there, because you've worked in music, you worked with the Divine Comedy, St Anta Records. I remember those days very, very well. I remember climbing out of a party window to escape a drummer from one of the bands you were repping at the time. What were they called? An Irish band. I think a lot of your bands were Irish.
Oh, yeah, St Anta Records was
and there was
an
a
Irish
band
that
I want to say it was a girl's name, but I remember the drummer. He was cute, but wasn't my thing. And we were at someone's house. I think it was your flat in Cricklewood, and I climbed out the window. Anyway, I digress.
Was it the Catchers?
Yes, I think it might have been.
It was the Catchers. Yes.
We were all dating musicians in the 90s, and you really were in the music industry as well. You got into it and were promoting bands, and you were working with Neil Hannon with the Divine Comedy, with the for the album cover of Casanova, which I've put on my stories today, which is also on your website. So you've got such a brilliant background anyway, and having lived part of it with you, I can absolutely verify that we had a blast. And you've always been so authentic and fascinated by learning and literature and theatre. And you always stop me from being, I think, a bit of a chav.
I'm not sure that that's true. I don't think you were a chav. You were always eccentric.
Very.
And yeah, you were always eccentric. And I think in a room, you and I were always the two loudest people.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, and especially when we got the giggles.
Yeah, we were
of course,
hilarious.
darling.
Anyway, where did we so music industry, that's it. So you got into the music industry, you were at Setanta, you then were at the National. You did a stint at the Opera House, didn't you, from what
I did. That's where I met my current lovely husband.
Where you met gorgeous Sam.
Yes. So I basically have got this theory about life, which is that you should just follow your passions and walk through any door that anyone opens. And so I ended up in the music industry quite by accident. I went to a gig because I love music. I talked very enthusiastically to a short Irish guy.
Blagged.
Yeah, blagged. And he was like, oh, we're looking for a PR. Can you do PR? And I was like, yeah, of course I can. I'll talk to anyone. I've never done PR in my life before. But I said, look, I don't know anything about music. And he said, well, as long as you like the things I tell you to like and tell everyone that they're good, that's the job. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And so I kind of used to get myself into interesting situations by being enthusiastic and saying yes to anything that looked interesting. Like I've never suffered with confidence because I figured if I make a mistake, I'll back out. I've never worried. So I took that on without knowing what on earth I was doing. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was the most fun. But I did find after being in the music industry, I did it for maybe 7 years. It's quite a wearing business to be in. It ages you quick. You become cynical. You definitely have way too many parties and get way too drunk. And you do get to do wild things and travel. And I had amazing experiences, but I knew it couldn't last forever. And I'd originally moved to London because I wanted to get into theatre. So when I hit 25, that's when I decided I was going to leave the music industry. By then I was already living with a member of the Divine Comedy romantically, and I had already done most of the things that I thought were interesting. And of course, the internet was changing the music industry in the 90s, and there was less money and things were less fun. So I was like, time to do something different. And I jumped ship.
So rewind to Sam Sedgman, because
zip.
This is the tour you're on now, isn't it? The books,
yes.
the Highland. So the
Highland Falcon Thief was the first train book in the series, but we're now on the fourth. I'm producing a book every 6 months for that series. So the one that's just come out is called Danger at Dead Man's Pass, and takes our intrepid detective all the way from Crewe, where he lives, down to London, onto the Eurostar, through Paris, onto a night train to Berlin, and up into the Harz Mountains of Germany.
It sounds brilliant, because A, I love Berlin, and B, Crewe is my husband's favourite station. Because Amelia goes to Liverpool Uni, and whenever she goes past Crewe, he says, take a photo. And it's become a standing joke that Crewe, we always take a photo of Crewe. So,
that's where my hero is from in the train.
From Crewe. And what age group are you? Because is it the same age demographic as Beetle Boy, or is this more? I know you would never make anything just for boys. I know that it will be completely gender equal, and that's why your books are so brilliant. And we've always been like that, smashing the stereotypes long before it was trendy, haven't we, Maya? But is this the same demographic as Beetle Boy, or would you say a bit older? Or
well, so the first book I'd say is probably available to slightly younger readers. The thing with reading age and actual physical age are not the same thing, because you can have a 6-year-old that is really good at reading, or you can have a 9-year-old that really struggles, and they might have the same reading age. So with children's books, the things that determine the reading age are to do with vocabulary, how complicated the vocabulary is, and to do with content, if it's too dark or if it takes a child to a place where they need to be a bit older to be able to deal with that much of a scare, or, So the first 2 books in the Adventures on Trains series, whilst it says 8 to 12 on them, are actually fine for a 6-year-old who's a good reader to read, because there's nothing in them that is too traumatic or scary for a 6-year-old. But then the next two books, Murder on the Safari Star, the clue is in the title. There is a murder in it, which makes it darker. And Danger at Dead Man's Pass is scary. It's our Halloween book. It's got curses and lots of scary things. And someone has died right at the beginning of that story. So the first two don't deal with death and don't have anything that a younger reader couldn't cope with. But the next two definitely, I would say, 8 to 12.
But by the time they've probably got to those two books, if they've started the first two at a younger age, by the time they've hit the third and fourth book, depending on how fast they read, they're probably sort of mature enough to understand. Do you get letters from parents saying, my child is traumatised?
You don't get letters anymore. You get Amazon reviews.
Sorry, showing my age.
You get Amazon reviews saying, my child loved the first two, but this third one is very dark. And, the thing is that I don't like brutality for brutality's sake. I don't think that has a place in children's fiction. So when we wrote Murder on the Safari Star, it's on a safari train, and when you go on safari, you see some brutal things. You do see nature, tooth and claw, in its bloody glory.
Yes,
you might
can't
see
hide that.
Exactly. You might see a pride of lions tearing apart a dead buffalo, for example, if you are on a safari. And so I felt like that was a suitable story within which to
deal with it, kids. That's life.
A human killing another human. But what I have done in that book is I've made it a locked room mystery so that the children detectives are never allowed to see the corpse or the dead guy, because in real life, of course, children would never be allowed near a murder scene. So the challenge for the children in that book is they have to solve the murder without ever seeing the dead body. And therefore, when you're reading it as a parent with your child, there aren't horrible pages of blood and deadness and things like that. There's none of that. So I've made it as palatable for young people as possible, but it's there in the title. It still has a murder in it.
Oh, now, so these last two take a slightly darker turn. I'm
Yes.
literally, can I just jump to the fourth? Do I have to read all three before? Because I don't read as much. You know this. This isn't because I don't want to read your books. It's because I read about one book a decade, so I want to make it count. So I could jump in at the fourth book and still know what was going on.
I would definitely recommend that you personally should read the fourth book, because I know that you love a bit of German culture, and the book celebrates Germany and is pretty much my love song to being European.
I'll only read it if you sign it.
Oh, of course, darling. I wouldn't mind doing that at all. But they are all standalone mysteries. So just like an Agatha Christie, lots of them have got Poirot solving them, or Miss Marple. It doesn't matter which order you read them in, you still get the mystery and the detective solving the case. But if you did read them in order as a child, you slowly get to know more and more things about the detective. And obviously, it's more value for young people to read in order, but they are written very specifically so that any order is fine. Because most school libraries, if you can't get the book you want, you don't get to always read things in order. Sometimes you just have to grab the book that's available on the shelf. So yes, they're all standalone stories.
And were these last two the ones written in lockdown? Do you think that affected your the light and the dark of the story? Or
so Danger in Dead Man's Pass was written in lockdown, and I also have had a solo book out just a couple of months ago called Twitch, which is about bird watching, and that was also written in lockdown. And one of the things that I found lockdown did when I was writing my solo book was made me determined that whoever read the book would have a completely uplifting and joyous experience. So it starts off in quite a dramatic, dark place, but the journey through that book is one of empathy and joy in nature. And the ending, I think it's probably the best ending I've ever written to any book, actually. It's spectacular, and you should close that book feeling just like the world is a wonderful place and that people are good at the heart of them. And so because lockdown for me was it was difficult for everyone, but I lost my mother-in-law just before lockdown to cancer, not to COVID. But we had a very strange funeral in the first couple of weeks of lockdown, where only 5 of us were allowed there, and there was this threat that we'd have to just watch it all on Zoom, which was horrific. Yeah. And it was quite there were dark times, and what that meant was that my husband spent the first 2 months of lockdown living with his dad, and I was alone at home with the kids doing the homeschooling,
Oh my
trying to write my
gosh.
books, also grieving, and my kids were
Yeah.
grieving, and also there was all the fear. So it was a lot to handle. It was a lot of sadness and fear and a lot of negative emotions. And I was trying to write Twitch at the same time. And so, almost as my rebellious nature likes to do, in the face of all of this darkness and fear and depression and anxiety and grief, I absolutely bloody mindedly wrote the most beautifully positive, joyous, celebratory thing I could, as a kind of two fingers up to the bloody
Yeah.
plague.
Yeah. Fuck you, plague. But also, that's
Exactly.
your therapy. That's
Yeah.
your mental health. That's how you deal with it. And we all talk about therapy and how some therapy, therapy just doesn't help some people, but actually, going for a 20-mile run is what they need. So
Yeah.
you found your therapy. And I think that's so lovely that you can, and out of such pain and sadness comes your best work often. Not saying that, you should just live in permanent pain and sadness, but
Oh, God,
there
no.
is a silver lining to suffering for authors, isn't there? Because out of darkness comes such light.
Yeah, I think so. Not for everyone, but I like, well, I mean, you know enough about my life. One of the things that I realized during lockdown is it wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And I was like, do you know what? I have coped with much worse. I've got a
Mm,
lovely house, lovely children that I love. I really don't mind being trapped with them for a couple of months. My
mm.
worries and anxieties were about their mental health and not being able to see their friends.
Yeah.
And I spent the whole time just trying to be delightful and make them see that, there was beauty and positivity and wonder in the world. And I didn't want them to be afraid. So it just made me realize that going through dark times is difficult for everyone, but it does arm you for dark times in the future. I am pretty certain that, people who've never suffered at all found the pandemic traumatic in a way that it
I
just
was
wasn't
going
for
to
me.
say that. I was
Yeah,
going to say that, May. I mean, you and I have both had, I had a very abusive
yeah,
stepfather, which
yeah.
then triggered quite severe OCD, which I think the hardest thing of OCD at that young age in the very early 90s was the shame and embarrassment because no one else I knew had it. Of course, other people did have it, but we didn't talk about it.
No one
So
was
the
talking about it.
biggest
Yeah.
problem for me with my OCD was hiding it from my friends, whereas I should have just said to my friends, I need your help here. You knew about my stepdad,
I
but we
did know
hadn't,
about your
but we
stepdad.
hadn't worked out why I had all these. Well, we didn't even know it was called OCD at the time. It was my mum has sort of said she does these really weird things and doesn't come out of the bathroom. Oh, she'll outgrow it. So we had no understanding of mental health. Unfortunately, you have to look at other misery to realise how lucky you are. And so for me, my horrific experiences, certainly that you said it, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. But actually, I think it's the key to gratitude, horrible experiences that make you realise. And every day I still feel lucky. Every day I wake up and think, I'm not still married to him, or my stepfather's not here
Yeah.
to do stuff. And same with you.
Well, I think it's because one of the things that we both loved theatre when we were
Mm,
young, but I do think that one of the reasons why we gravitated towards one another in an unspoken way, because no one talked about this stuff when
no.
we were little, is that we were both from abusive families
Hmm.
and we both had experienced abuse, but no one talked about
No.
abuse. But I feel like you and I almost immediately recognized each other as someone similar. And
Yeah.
even though we never had, no one really shared stuff because there was this level of shame in
Hmm.
some, which,
I'm feeling really emotional because I remember, I really knew I knew that I could trust you, and
yeah,
it was unspoken, but I knew you got it and you
yeah,
understood.
yeah, exactly that. And so, we would defend each other and look
Mm,
after each other and have each other's backs without ever explicitly stating why or what it was that was making us the way that we were. We both knew.
yeah. Well, we were
Don't
all.
sometimes you don't need words.
No, no. And you look back now, and I've got children. I mean, how old's Arthur now? He's 16?
16,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Amelia is 20, Hugo's 18. And I look at them and I think, okay, so by 20, I'd already lived in 3 different flats in London and had a year in Switzerland and was back working in Oxford Street. At 18, you and I know that you certainly had moved out of home very, very young. And I think at 18...
Yep, I was booted out when I was 18
yeah.
and one day. Yeah.
I cannot imagine my children doing now what we did, and without the use of mobile phones. Can I just point out?
I know.
How did we find each other and not get lost? And we didn't.
I mean, we all had ways, though. We all had. I mean, there wasn't even email back then, Meredith. That is how old we are.
We didn't have text or phones.
No. But we would all meet at a certain time at a certain place, and we would know that people would be there. I mean, quite often I would just go to, for example, the Phoenix Bar in Soho, just assuming at some point I would bump into Tim, or I'd bump into you, or because that's where we would go. Same with the...
I had my 21st there at the Phoenix.
Yeah. The White Hart in the old town in Hemel Hempstead. I'd just go there. I knew that someone I knew would be in there.
Yeah. And we didn't care.
That's what we did.
Because you just went in, and there was always... You could create a party out of nothing. And that's the thing I think our children's generation will miss out on, because it's also social. But although saying that, thank God for technology during a pandemic, because I think if I'd have been trapped at home in that remote cottage, age 15, with an abusive stepfather during lockdown, I can't even bear to think of it.
Yeah, that's the thing that I did think during the pandemic, is just huge empathy for everybody who is in unhappy relationships, who is trapped with someone who, if they have a third or fourth drink, they are going to get violent. Or, there are many, many people in that situation. And that was the thing about the pandemic. I just thought, I got out my sewing machine. I made masks for all my family out of some lovely old bits of cotton. I ignored what the government said and listened to the WHO, of course. And I just thought, right, I've got exactly what you said. I've got a lovely house, lovely family. We're dealing with the grief of losing Jane, my mother-in-law. Everything else, it's fine. It's totally fine. And I think that's the thing. I think it's one of the things that's made it hard and good about the pandemic is everybody has struggled. So there's lots of empathy because everybody has struggles. But the thing that's hard is that usually when you have a struggle, you're depressed or upset about something, you turn to your friend and you have a good old moan and get it off your chest, and they help you feel better.
Yep.
But now when you turn and moan to your friend, they're like, oh, I know. And they've got just as awful a story. Everyone has. I don't know how we get over the grief of losing the last year and a half and the struggles that have happened during that time. Which is why I want to write positive books for children. I don't want them to read anything hopeless. I want them to read things that will give them joy. And that's what I'm trying to create, really.
Do you think you'll refer to lockdown, or have you referred to lockdown in any of your books to make, or is it better to be a timeless, you can't put dates on them? I mean, how does that... imagining Mallory Towers, the sixth form at Mallory Towers was all done via homeschooling. I don't know how much you refer to something because it dates something. I think
if you're writing historical fiction, or you're writing something that's very specifically set in this present moment, right now, then of course you have to put technology in, and you have to put truth in. I don't write those kinds of books, and I very specifically choose not to, because I think that a lot of children's joy in reading is to escape the reality of now. And I don't particularly think there's much joy in the pandemic. So I don't want to put it into a book. I'm pretty sure in 20 years' time, there will be children's authors who refer to it. But I think sometimes when you're in the midst of something, it's not the right time to consider it. Hindsight gives you a much better way of dealing with it. I found the same thing. I was working in the theatre when 9/11 happened. And I was part of a festival of theatre in New York to commemorate 9/11 a year later. And many playwrights had the same problem. We were all tasked with coming up with short bits of theatre about the incident, the falling of the Twin Towers, etc. And many playwrights were like, it's just too raw and present for me to be able to digest it and produce a piece of writing about it. Because it was such a shock and such a terrifying moment in world history, and many people were in deep grief for a very long period of time, particularly Americans. And so it was just too soon to be able to know what that moment meant. And no one wants to write about it in a disrespectful or in a incendiary way that causes more problems. So I think it's the same with the pandemic, particularly with children's fiction. I don't think it's right yet to talk about it. So my books talk about a vague present, contemporary time, but I tend to eliminate as much technology as possible because it's the surefire way to date a story, because technology moves so fast.
iPhone 7, and how long ago was that?
I know, right? And so yeah, I try and find believable ways to avoid it if possible. And so no, I don't write about the pandemic.
With your main protagonists, I mean, I've read Beetle Boy, but certainly with your books about with the kids all investigating murders, do you draw from any of your past experiences growing up that say some of the characters do come from abusive backgrounds, or do you try and keep it as fluffy as possible? Because I remember reading books when I was little, and if there was a main character who'd sort of was coming through from an abusive background, they'd escaped, the sort of Smike type character, Nicholas Nickleby, I actually felt some comfort in that, knowing I wasn't alone. But I guess it's a child's book. You don't want to bring darkness or trigger warnings. That's the other thing as well. It's a minefield now, isn't it?
Yes.
Back when Enid Blyton was writing, she got away with all sorts. Now,
well, yeah, she didn't mind upsetting anyone. But no, I think so. What I try and keep is a grain of truth about motivation. This is going to sound complicated, but in the Beetle Boy books, for example, there is a villain. She is a woman called Lucretia Cutter, and she is a mother. She has a daughter in the books called Novak, and she is not a loving mother. She is an abusive mother.
She's a narcissistic mother.
She is a narcissistic, self-centered egotist. And so she doesn't really care about anyone, but her biggest crime, the thing that heralds her as a villain in the eyes of the children that read the books, is she really doesn't care about her own daughter, and she is abusive to her daughter, yet dressing her daughter in lovely clothes. So it's like a real, it's a combination of people see the character of Novak and think, oh, I'd love to be her. She's rich and she wears designer clothes and she's an actress. But yet her mother is scornful, treats her like an accessory, like a handbag, and is physically and mentally abusive to her daughter, all in the story. But the thing that makes it ring true, the things that she does are ridiculous. It's not too much of a spoiler to say that my villain, Lucretia Cutter, is part insect. And so a lot of her villainous behaviour, it doesn't feel too scarily real or gritty because the woman is part insect. She has 4 legs.
She's Anna Wintour. In my head, she's Anna Wintour. That's exactly how I pictured Lucretia.
Yeah, she's Anna Wintour with 4 legs and 2 arms and part beetle. And so because she's not real, and her behaviour can be seen as not real, but if you have an abusive mother, and I had an abusive mother, there are ways that she talks to and about her daughter that are very truthful to the way that humans treat each other in the real world if they're self-centered and narcissistic. And so even though I wrap it up in a baddie that's just ridiculous and not plausible, not possible, some of her behaviours, anyone who knows will recognise and know that they're seen. I think that's the thing about children's stories, is you can give children the opportunity to feel seen in a story and relate to a character because and without the story having to be about abusive mothers, because it isn't. It's just part of that relationship. So I feel like there's a lot of truth in my stories in fantastical scenarios. But what's great about a murder plot is, you've got a cast of suspects, and I've met the great and the good, the rich and the ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I love stealing things from my past and just smearing it all over these fictional characters and giggling to myself as I'm putting them in scenarios which I know exactly what they would say and what they would do.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Now, please tell me that Beetle Boy and Lucretia are going to come to life.
Yes.
They are, aren't they? I haven't
They
dreamt
are.
that. Because that
No,
sort of
you
happened
haven't
before
dreamt
lockdown,
that.
didn't it? And then...
Yeah, and lockdown has definitely like put a spanner in lots of developmental work. So the thing about Beetle Boy is that it has a lot of insects in it, and it's not a cheap thing to make, because what we want to make is a live action TV series out of the books with
oh, I'm so excited. You're going to be the next J.K. Rowling. I can't cope. You already
CGI,
are in my mind.
Oh, bless you. CGI insects. So there is a company called Frame Store that makes all the best CGI that you see in TV and movies. So they did Philip Pullman's Dark Materials. They made all the demons in that, but they also did Paddington Bear in the movies, and they do all the Avengers stuff, and all of the best CGI is done by Frame Store. And so where we had got to before lockdown is that Frame Store had done some CGI beetles, which look amazing. I mean, unbelievable. We had a pilot. CGI. Yeah, we had a pilot script, and we had a trio of production companies, one of which being Frame Store, that were going out to pitch to the big streaming companies, because we know it's a TV series, not a film.
Why do you know
and
that?
Then, well,
Sorry
because
to interrupt, but why? Why? I see it's a
because
film.
the entire, if you're going to shoot the entire trilogy, the way that film works, you need, because the whole trilogy takes place over a timeline of 6 months. So you need a child that only ages 6 months.
Oh,
if you're going to make 3 movies, that's going to take 6 years, and the child actor would become too old. But if you're shooting TV series, actually in modern times, it's much easier to do that without the children aging too much. So it's a TV series, but
oh, it's
COVID
so
happens.
Exciting. Who would be, I shouldn't ask this is terrible, this is not giving anything away because you haven't cast it or anything. Who would be your dream Lucretia? Because I have to say, while she was absolutely vile, I loved doing her voice when
fabulous.
I read it to my son. Because Beetle Boy I read to Hugo bedtime story, because I can't believe how long ago was it? How long ago was Beetle Boy?
6 years ago. Yeah.
And it was our little bedtime reading book together. It was wonderful. But who would be your dream actress for that job?
If I could handpick anyone, because this is the problem I also had when I started, is that I realised that I'm too old. My dream cast women are all too old. But if I could handpick anyone, person I think would do something really interesting with the part would be Amy Adams. So she did a whole series where she played a slightly psychotic mother. Amy Adams has got that, like, honey dripping from her tongue, sugar wouldn't melt kind of thing, and at the same time can do psycho killer, terrifying, like maniac. And the thing about Lucretia Cutter is that she is someone who's able to put on many faces. She is a megalomaniac, but she also knows what she has to do to get there, and she has to be genuinely terrifying. And I feel like it's a gift of a part for an actress, basically.
Oh,
but
it's the best part ever written.
Oh yeah, I feel
brilliant.
Like it takes Cruella and makes Cruella look boring. So I feel like Amy Adams would do an amazing job. But there are so many great actresses that could do that job well. I have to say, I've always imagined Darkus's dad as Michael Fassbender.
Oh God, yes, I can see that.
And of course, there has to be some kind of tension between Darkus's dad and Lucretia Cutter, because they had a relationship at university that is in the past, in the deep past, and it's part of their. So the adult kind of fight, like you have in his Dark Materials, you have Mrs. Coulter versus Lord Asriel. In this, you've got Bartholomew Cuttle, Darcus's dad, versus Lucretia Cutter. And I feel like
Wonderful
Michael
names.
Fassbender and Amy Adams would be fantastic. I mean, if
I
they're
think
listening,
Rachel
please do
Sterling
call.
as well.
Yeah, she would be
Rachel
fabulous.
Sterling, because I was actually, I know you were saying, you said your favourite actresses are all the too old or too dead. I think Diana Rigg would have been amazing. As
Oh, she would
Lucretia,
have.
wouldn't
And
she?
Rachel's...
So
yeah,
Rachel is her
Rachel's
daughter,
amazing.
and I think,
Yes.
yeah. Oh gosh!
But this is
And
the
will it be
thing.
an English
So,
production, or you don't know yet? You just don't know any of
so
this.
well, it will be commissioned in America, but probably so.
So will it be on Netflix? Do you think?
I cannot say.
I know you can't say. I know.
cannot
It's just
say.
honestly, I'm literally hyperventilating about how exciting this is. Purely for my opening gambits when we're all invited back to dinner party. Say, my mate wrote that.
Well, when we have a set, I will invite you to
Oh
come
my God!
waltz around it with me. That would be the
Yes.
most fun.
Well, you could actually give Hugo some work experience because he wants to be a cinematographer. So,
Oh, does he? Fabulous.
yeah. And in fact, I completely understand what you're saying because he had to get work experience this last year on a film set, and I could not get him on anything. The COVID
No.
restrictions are so
Well,
tight.
one of the things that we found is that what the big studios like Netflix did is they put all of their development money and their commissioning money into animation because they didn't know how long COVID would last, and like COVID adds like millions of pounds to any live action shoot budget because everyone has to be tested every day and kept apart, and you need more staff. But in animations, animators can function in isolation. They can be given a short piece to animate and they can send it in virtually. And so what the big studios have done is just for the last 2 years is invest heavily in animation. And that means anything that's live action like Beetle Boy or anyone that's trying to make a film is in a queue, just waiting until COVID stops being such a massive issue, which I'm hoping we're coming to that time now. Like we've only been able to fly to America in the last couple of weeks. And that obviously, that's something that has stopped development as well.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that things will open up again in the next few months and that COVID would just go away because it's so annoying.
Yeah, I wish it would go away. But I mean, it's has also given you time to write some, I know that you would have been out doing lots of things like book tours and signings, but I do also think that we're very lucky that authors were wedged at home and probably produced an extra book when they may not have done if we'd not been in a pandemic. So I'm grateful for in that respect, that's for sure. That more beautiful stuff was created, and certainly I think people adapted. My husband retrained as a podcast editor, and here we are 2.5 years later. What advice would you give? Because obviously this isn't just us chatting. As much as I'd love it to be, we do have listeners, and honestly, you've been so brilliant, as I knew you would be, and so fascinating. And I absolutely know that I can verify you came from such tough circumstances, and to see you where you are today just fills me with such optimism and positivity. And I really do believe your story is so inspiring for other women, certainly single mums, or to anyone thinking of writing a book. What would be your advice? Where do you start? Do you get a notebook? What do you do?
Well, I've got lots
tough
of
one,
advice.
I know.
No,
but you're
just,
so
there's much that I want to
inspiring,
say.
and I just think you weren't privately educated. You weren't.
No,
you weren't.
No, I wasn't privately educated.
Not at all.
I failed all of my A levels, people, and I went to college with Mezza, where we both did drama badly.
About.
So for anyone listening who thinks you have to go to Oxbridge and be like one of the super elite, I mean, this is the other thing is that Mezza and I do really good posh RP voices so that we can sound intelligent and from wealthy backgrounds.
Yeah.
But the truth is we're common as muck, and
I'm just a bloody immigrant.
Yeah, well, there you go. You shouldn't even be in this country,
Exactly.
darling. What is that? But the thing is that, no, I struggled at school. I was tested for everything, like dyslexia, attention deficit disorder. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you
because
see,
my
they wouldn't
writing...
test me because my mum said it was all just newfangled words for lazy children.
No, I got tested and they said I wasn't dyslexic. I was just thick.
Yeah.
So I I my spelling,
Oh,
punctuation, and grammar has always been atrocious, and I realised as an adult that I don't think this is a condition at all. My brain works very fast, as you can hear. I love
yep.
talking, and I process things orally. And my dexterous ability is slow, and there's no connection between the two. I can touch type now. I couldn't do that at school. No one would let you do that nowadays.
No,
But when I write books, I can just literally close my eyes and touch type as fast as the words come into my head, which I've never been able to do with a pen.
really, is it
And of
literally
course,
just comes out like magic?
yeah. And the other thing is I don't give a shit about grammar and punctuation anymore because I have a word processor that just underlines everything that's wrong. So
Oh,
it just
marvelous.
it just drives me mad because when I was at school, I really felt like I was stupid. Like I remember when email came into existence. I used to, oh my God, spend hours looking at my email, terrified that I was going to send an email to someone that would just basically announce that I was inept and stupid, and that they would be able to see from the way that I put a sentence together that I was a moron. And I genuinely believed because of school that I was
Isn't
stupid.
that
I
shit?
failed everything. Yes, it is. That's why I don't
Oh.
think education worked for me. So yeah, I did believe that. And uh, so first of all, my advice, if you want to write a book, is ignore everything that you were taught at school if
Mhm.
what they taught you was that you were stupid. If you're the kind of person that can sit down at a pub table with a circle of mates and tell a story and they're all listening to every word, waiting to hear what's going to be the punchline, then you can write a book. And the greatest and the oldest stories were always invented and told orally anyway. They didn't write shit down in Homer's time. The Odyssey, the Iliad, they were all spoken stories. So that's my first thing. Don't let any of that shit stop you. Don't
Yeah.
feel like you have to go to university being super clever. If you can tell a good story, you can tell a good story. The next thing that I would say is that if you're going to write a book, the worst thing is that we all second guess ourselves. So when you start writing a book, what tends to happen is you write a couple of chapters because you're really excited about your idea. And then as that enthusiasm dwindles, you go back and read those chapters and they're not as brilliant as you thought they were going to be. So you start editing them and then you start editing them more. And then you end up stuck just working on the same bit and you never get past that opening. And then eventually your idea kind of dries up like a dead old husk.
And is that
And then you
writer's
think,
block? That's what they call writer's
that's what
block.
people say writer's block is. I don't believe in writer's block. What I think is that you have to feel like you are Orpheus dragging Eurydice out of the underworld. Your book is behind you and you're not allowed to look at it until you've got out of hell. Hell is the first draft. You have to put word after word after word after word until you've told your story all the way to the end. Once you get to the end of your story without ever looking back at a word of it, you put it away and then you get it out and you edit the whole thing. You can only really
Ah,
work on a story once you've got the whole thing, but we all get stuck in the beginnings. And the temptation, I've written more than 10 books. I still want to go back to beginnings and rework them to make them better, but I don't allow myself now until I've got to the end. So if you can get to the end of a
that's
story,
great
you've got
advice.
something. Yeah. And
That's
then you can make it
great.
better. Yeah, and most writing is editing, really. It's making it better. All my first drafts, no one ever reads them because they are, excuse my language for a children's author, fucking shit. I
Well,
mean,
because you're thick, really. That's the problem.
yeah, I'm
Deep down,
thick.
you're
I
thick,
can't
stupid,
spell
and a
exactly.
bit dyslexic,
Grammar,
possibly.
exactly. So they are fucking embarrassing and I would never show anyone, but they are a whole story. And then I look at it and I think, right, I need to make this better. And I have lots of experience working in theatre, collaboratively. Like I'm very good at spotting things that need improving. I can spot a commercial idea from a mile off because of my experience in the music
Hmm.
industry. So all of my life experience comes into hopefully making a really well polished book, but I never deliver anything to an editor until I know it's like if you tapped it with metal, it would ring and make a beautiful tone. But yeah, the first draft's horrid. If you tapped it with metal, it would probably fart at you. I mean, it's just so
That is the
yeah.
most
Don't
liberating and inspiring advice ever. It is. It's just like just write freely. Just
right.
let it all
Yeah,
come out, and then go back to it. Don't just keep that momentum. And that's so.
yeah.
Oh
And
God, that's such good advice.
if you're a talker like Mez, I know you're a talker. If you were writing a book, what I would say is get your audio recorder out and just
Mm.
talk chapter one. Be like, okay, it's chapter one. What's going to happen? We're going to open on and just talk and then type it out and then edit that. If you can't write straight from your imagination onto a keyboard or a page, talk it out, and then edit it.
And then can you, I guess, if you've done, and you really can't type because potentially there might be people that don't even have access to type, but they can record on their phone. Yeah. You've got all these brilliant ideas and all these brilliant voice notes. I'm assuming you can find people that will transcribe this all for you.
Yeah, but also the thing that's crazy now, this is going to make me sound really old. I don't know all of the things that all the software does, but I only discovered last year that I can talk to Word, to Microsoft Word, and it will literally write down what I'm saying.
Don't ever get caught out though. I did that on a voice memo once, and it was disastrous. You have better diction than me. But there were a few words which were a bit dubious, and I would
check. Yeah, you should check before you just hit send. But like, if you're going to write a book and you can't type for whatever reason, you can just talk to Word and say, once upon a time in a land far, far away, and the words will appear in the document.
This is why I think you should do the bedtime hour on CBeebies. You've done your own audiobooks, haven't you?
Yes,
it is your voice, except for the foreign.
It is only on my solo books. I have to say, I when we were writing the Adventures on Trains books, I said right from the outset, okay, I do like to do my own audiobooks because I love doing voices, and obviously I write these stories so I know how the characters should sound, but I will not do the Adventures on Trains books because each book is set in a different country and have the accents are like mental. Murder on the Safari Star is set in South Africa and it has a variety of accents. And I said to the publishers, get an actor whose speciality is accents, because each book, like, you know, the new one, full of German accents, and they are, some of them, very specific to parts of Germany.
Do them. Well, yes, my grandmother had the strongest Saxony accent. Exactly. I couldn't recreate a Saxony at all.
So they hired a professional to deal with all of the accents in those books. But I do my solo books. I did all the Beetle Boy audiobooks and the Twitch audiobooks, and I love doing them.
I think that just must be the cherry on the cherry on the icing. You know, you've written your book. They've done well. They've been made into audiobooks, and then you get to literally live your... I just think it's so brilliant. And I think what we've learned here today is that you don't need a degree. You don't need to be surrounded by academics. You just need to be able to tell a bloody good story and be a bit of a blagger. I mean, I'm still in PR.
Are you saying that I'm a bit of a blagger?
Well, I think...
I am, darling, I am.
I think the best that blag is the ones we do to ourselves, because it takes away the fear. You know, if you blag yourself that you can do something, you don't then have a chance to second think it. And if you actually think back and go, bloody hell, I had some balls doing that. But at the time, I'm talking about hustling and blagging yourself. Just go for it. And that's the same principle, really, as just
I'm a massive hustler. Yeah,
massive hustler.
I'm a huge hustler.
Do you remember, and I've spoken about this on the podcast, where Hepner PR came from? Hepner PR came from a made-up company so we could get into nightclubs free in the 90s, and we used it to get into that bloody photo shoot at Stringfellows.
I know, I remember that.
We pretended we were a PR firm, and Peter Stringfellow gave us his whole nightclub. So it just goes to show you, if you're told you're thick, if you're told you're stupid, if you come from a really crappy background, you take those experiences, you draw on them, and you make it happen. And these award-winning books that are about to be immortalised forever on our screens by my wonderful dear friend are testament to that you can, and this girl can. And I know that's such a cliche, but we were told we couldn't so often.
I know. And if anyone can, if I can, anyone can. You asked me before we pressed record whether I thought success had changed me. And I, people always love to say, no, I'm the same. But no, it's absolutely changed me, because I've always been a blagger. I've always, taken a deep breath, walked in somewhere and just seen what happens. And if someone asks me if I can do something, I say yes, and then I try. And if I fail, I fail. But the thing about success with these books, and the thing that is amazing to me, like when people give me awards, I giggle, because I never got one award ever in my life at school. And the concept that those teachers at school that used to tell me I was rubbish would be seeing me being awarded, the Highland Falcon Thief won the children's best book of the year, beating both J.K. Rowling and David Walliams.
Literally gives me goosebumps, you saying that.
I know. I'm literally doing the David Brent dance of like, mostly thinking about those teachers who used to tell me I was dumb. Like, you know.
Do you want to dedicate any books to them? No. But yeah, I kind of would. And
just my awards.
Yeah, fuck you.
Just my awards. But the thing is that it has changed me, because now I have, right in the deep heart of me, I always used to feel like an outsider, like I didn't belong, or I didn't fit in, or that there was something a bit broken or wrong with me that made me separate from everyone. And the thing about these books doing well and children embracing them, and really that's the biggest joy, it's not the awards, it's the children loving them. I've realised that, you know what, that feeling has gone away, the outsider feeling, that I've realised that feeling,
imposter
that I
syndrome,
called
isn't it?
Yeah, but that feeling is kind of who I am, and that's okay. And I'm like, I like myself for the first time, and in my life.
Really?
The last 10 years have been a joy. Yeah, in my 20s I did not like myself. I did everything that people who do not like themselves do. But now, like, I'm a really happy person, and that's because I think I found my calling, which is to pelt bad guys with poo and hang out with kids and tell stories. And yeah, success has definitely changed me. I'm much calmer and happier than I ever was.
There couldn't be a better place to end this interview. Although you and I could chat forever, and we will, and we'll organise lunch. I'm going to come down to Brighton and steal all your books.
Please do.
What a beautiful way to end the interview. I honestly, Maya, you've just M G Leonard, I should say, award-winning author, and soon to be film. It's TV series, as you said, not film. But what do I say then? A film writer, screenwriter as well. Do you write the screen?
Right, for the small screen.
Who adapts the books? Oh, that's a whole nother episode.
Oh, there's so much. Honestly,
when it goes on TV, can we have you back on the podcast?
Oh, I would love
that
to.
Be okay?
I would love to. Yeah, and the podcast is fabulous, by the way. Congratulations on that. It's a joy to listen to.
Oh, thank you. You see, I have imposter syndrome and think, who would want to listen to me? And then I get the fear about things I've said and the sound of my voice. But listening to you actually is so inspiring. And it's just go with it. Just, run with it. And
just be yourself.
I'm afraid I've done this with this interview, because Jeremy's always like, remember your timings, remember it's only a 45-minute episode, and we've chatted, and he's now got but I've taken your advice. There we go. That's my argument. I just went with it. We can go back and edit it afterwards, but not that there's anything I want to cut out. But this has just been a joy. Thank you. And you have got to come on. I want to get the books to my nephew. My nephew's a massive train fanatic, and he's 10, so he's perfect.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah. He's perfect. So if I could sort out some books for Christmas, that would be amazing.
No problem.
And we will have you on when Beetle Boy hits our TV screens. What's next, though? Well, other than everything. Well, Domination, is there another book?
So the train series carries on apace. So there's a new train book coming out in February that I'm just working on literally today, called Sabotage on the Solar Express, and that one is set in Australia. And then there is a second birdwatching book, because that is a series as well, that will come out next autumn. And then there will be another train book before Christmas, which is going to be set in the Arctic and will have a Christmas flavour. So 3 more books next year, and a lot more besides.
Take it easy
probably.
Then, yeah.
Oh yeah, just kicking back, writing a few books. What are these authors that take 7 years to write a book? What are they doing? Scratching their asses? I don't know.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And all of us will be back next week. Hayley, Natalie, Stephen, and of course producer Jeremy with our regular Would You Rather questions. I've been Meredith. My incredible guest was M G Leonard, and you can find out everything you need to know about us in the show notes. Until next time, goodbye.